is Tom Miller, and I want to talk to you today about a new paradigm for influence. And I want to use a story about a Dallas real estate developer who's transforming the city with these new tactics and a new strategy. But to get to this tactics and strategy, I need to tell you a little bit of history first about Dallas and where it came from and what Scott battled as he began the journey. So the Trinity River flows through the middle of the state, and Dallas was founded in 1850 as a trading community. It was not particularly notable at the time, but it transformed cotton up and down the Trinity River. It was a slave state, and for about 40, 50 years, it functioned as a place for trade along the Trinity River, and it grew over time in its crossroads position. Oil was discovered, and Texas boomed. Dallas did too. Dallas initially was the center of the oil commerce. That moved to Houston, but the financial part of it stayed in Dallas. And as Dallas grew, the oil business grew, real estate business grew, the financial part of the economic engine grew, and Dallas, the culture of Dallas developed as a place where money is made. It is a very, very capitalistic city, and they are proud of that, and that's the way that it operates. It's a piece of the culture. And over time, the power structure within Dallas became about paternity. Who was your family? There were about 12 families that were the core of Dallas, and then they grew out of that and spread. There's even an area of town that sort of resides in. Your possessions, how much did you have, and could you acquire more, and what did that become about? Or your position. So Texas actually has the highest concentration of Fortune 500 companies in the world relative to its population. So there are a lot of powerful companies, a lot of powerful people there, and that's how deals got done in Dallas. So Scott Rohrman is a Dallas real estate developer, and he had a different perspective about how to get deals done. He grew up in this environment from a professional standpoint. Scott's from a middle-class family in Mississippi and was a new person to Dallas. He was not part of the three Ps initially, and so he knew what it felt like to be on the outside of that. A very successful developer within that system. And as he began to have opportunities to do new things and look at things in a different way, he came across an idea. So what happened with Dallas as it grew, in concentric rings here, you have to remember the minority communities would locate into different sectors of town. And so they located in East Dallas in an area that's called Deep Ellum. Deep Elm, it's called Deep Ellum now because that's how it was pronounced by the African Americans at the time. And so Deep Ellum, as Dallas developed, became a place where drugs were rampant, where homelessness was rampant, where the crime activity was high. So in modern day, as segregation became less a known fact, that area of town still struggles and has struggled until the last few years. So, and highways developed here, roads developed that continued to segregate it even further. So in Deep Ellum, there's about a 10-block square area of buildings that were the heart of the Deep Ellum community back 70, 80 years ago, and that's the part of town that at this point is depressed. So building costs are very low, cost of real estate is going high everywhere else. A developer looks at that and says, supply and demand, I think I can go to that place and acquire buildings, but what are they worth? Scott had an opportunity to buy about a third of the buildings that were available in Deep Ellum. So over time, he acquired those properties. And the unique thing about it is Scott he could have operated in that position power scenario and gone into the homeless community, gone into the art community, gone into the people that were in some way squatting in that community and kicked them out. He had the legal right to do that. In some ways, that was the pattern. That was what real estate, how things had happened in Dallas before. What he chose to do instead, though, was to go to the community and create community. He had a business goal. His goal was not, he's not an NGO. His goal was to make money. He had investors and a fiduciary responsibility to turn that project into something that was very, very profitable. And to do that, first he went to the artist community, and with the theory that if artists go to the area, then other people will follow. Money will follow the artists. And so he gave them space. He let them go to spaces that they were using anyway. Nobody was going to go in and rent those spaces at this time, so he gave them the space, and he actually painted it for them, and he put better lights up. He worked with the homeless community, and Scott actually walked the streets with police, and he went to local homeless shelters. And there'd not been good communication between the police and the homeless shelters. And Scott worked with the cops in that area to, instead of pushing the homeless out of the area, actually working with the shelters so that there were people that could walk these homeless folks to the shelters and get them help they need. Or if there were further situations that needed hospitalizations, he'd help them with that too. So he improved communication, he put lighting up, and he began to make it feel safe for the community that was already there. There was no thought at this point to bringing new people into the space. It was all about the existing community. The other thing Scott did was work with the graffiti artists, and he actually had a lot of fun with this. So this was a place where graffiti was rampant, and some of it was not particularly pleasant, and some of it actually was quite artistic. So graffiti artists had found this place vacant, low light, and so they were, the cops weren't really caring, so they were just going crazy with this. And Scott said, well, you know what? Part of the culture of this place is the graffiti. What if we organized it? So he got the top, they call them taggers, the top taggers together, and he said, look, why don't you guys, can you paint over here? And by the way, let's have a little contest. And so I want you guys for the next 2 weeks, show me your best stuff. Because you guys paint over each other all the time, then I'll let you guys select who you want to keep up. And we're just going to keep that up there. We're going to keep that up there for 6 months. And so he created some space for the graffiti artists to be seen and to be part of the community, as opposed to being pariahs that felt like they were being run out of town. The existing occupants, the people that were actually renting space there weren't many of them. Scott cleaned the lighting up, made it more attractive from that standpoint, and he began to talk to city officials about what could happen in that space. So by that time, with some of the cleanups that had been done, he'd begun to attract some new tenants. So you've got some real tenants coming who are paying slightly higher rents. And so he was able to actually buy more buildings, and his investors got more excited about the potential. And so rents, the financial engine began to crank up a bit, and he began to get the results that he was looking for. So he still had a challenge with a few of the tenants that were existing, and the one that, there was a leader of the pack. And Scott finally, had a chance to sit down with that guy, because the guy would just avoid him the whole time. And Scott said, Rick, I'm Scott Rohrman. And the guy said, I know who you are. He said, you're that asshole that's going to come in here and cause rates to go up. And so Scott took that situation and calmed it down, ultimately turned that person into an advocate, and that person then went back into the community and convinced them that this Dallas real estate developer was about their community. He wasn't going to kick them out. He was actually going to make things better for the existing tenants. And Scott's done that. So his business goal is being achieved in part by addressing the local community, by the power, the influence of his character, of being consistent, of being someone who looks at the humans that are in the space and addressing them as people, and by allowing choice. And by taking away the stick of possession, of paternity, of position, and instead using community, character, and choice as the influence levers to create change. The interesting thing that's happening is that Scott was doing that, the work on the ground in the community. He was also talking to community leaders, to the city leaders, to the mayor, to the various city councilmen, and to the local aldermen in our area. And so there were some geographic boundaries that people thought were static, that weren't going to go anywhere. And so back in the 1960s, a fair park had been developed out here as a way to seed a difficult community in an attempt to bring some commerce into that space. It was marginally successful. So as they began to look at, as a team, as a community leading team, what could happen, they're now talking about destroying an elevated 6-lane highway, moving that out of the way. They're talking about changing a highway that runs east-west. And effectively, if you were looking at a map of Dallas, effectively opening up and connecting downtown, Deep Ellum, and a Hispanic community that used to be, and are today, if it doesn't change, they still will be, are separated by major highways or major kind of physical boundaries. And if those all go away, Dallas itself will become more pedestrian-oriented, will become easily accessible to anybody in the community. One part of the community can access another part of the community, and the richness of the community will be deepened and broadened, all by a for-profit real estate developer who simply used different tactics. He drew down traditional power plays and instead looked at people in their space, saw them as humans, and helped their lives be better. And so the story is still unfolding. In the next year or two, I should be able to come back and tell you what's happening, but it's really exciting watching it and seeing what's happening. We're very hopeful that Dallas will be a much more pleasant city to live in, to visit, to do business in, and to be proud to be from. Thank you very much.